visiting Jake's parents for the first time. He hasn't been my boyfriend for very long.
They really are looking forward to meeting you.
I think of ending
things is Charlie Kaufman's latest existential nightmare about a young woman who comes to visit her boyfriend's parents only to discover not only are they really weird, but the general concept of time, space, and continuity appears to alter at a whim. I've always liked Kaufman's work as a screenwriter. He's one of the few Hollywood people who actually challenges his audience to think about what they're watching. I do, however, have a bit more of a preference to his earlier work before he started directing. I really enjoyed Anomalisa, but Synecdoche, New York I wasn't too sure about, although YMS's ongoing analysis of it does make me want to give it another look. His work seems to benefit on repeat viewings, and I believe this one will be no different. It's tough to actually define what it feels like to watch this. You could categorize it as a drama first, as it very much is one, but you could also describe it as a psychological horror, even though it doesn't really follow any of the common tropes that genre usually entails. The best way I would describe it would be if you were living through a fever dream. And I don't mean trippy, weird nonsense. It's more of a very claustrophobic feeling, like you're in a situation that isn't outright threatening, but you just feel really uncomfortable and you really want to leave from it, which is exactly how our introspective protagonist feels throughout. While polite and conversational enough on the outside, on the inside her mind is filled with doubts, her most common thought during the whole trip being,
I'm thinking of ending things.
She isn't sure of what's causing her to have this reaction. Her boyfriend isn't a bad guy or anything, and they haven't been dating long, but there's just a feeling that's not right. A feeling that only increases as soon as they get to the parents' house, when not a single piece of information, up to and including our protagonist's name, ever seems permanent. There is also a side story about a high school janitor doing his regular job as the school prepares for its annual performance of Oklahoma. How this ties together is a journey in and of itself. Like a lot of his other work, there are things in the film that are a little tough to comprehend at face value. A lot of the themes here are similar to ones he did in Schenectady, especially in regards to aging and how time easily slips through our fingers. There are things in it that I'm not so sure about, like a lot of the conversations about the human condition got a little on the repetitive side for me, and I'm not 100% sure if I really got a lot of the twists that were thrown. Although this is all coming from my initial reaction, so it could be taken with a grain of salt. I sometimes feel like Kaufman works better when he has another director to kinda rein him in, whether it be a Spike Jonze or a Mikhail Gondry, but I'm just happy he's working. I sorta have to applaud Netflix for giving him a distributor when no one else kinda understandably won't. Seems like for every 10 kissing booths or cuties posters, they'd release a Roma, or a Marriage Story, or whatever interesting art film they'll give a well-respected auteur carte blanche on, as the average person is far more susceptible to watch anything that's in immediate vicinity, instead of getting up and paying $12 to go to a theater. Well, obviously not now, but I think my point still stands. The performances are great, direction is great, it has a wonderfully unnerving mood. I do recommend it, but you really have to be in the right mindset to see this in. There are far more car conversations than I would have guessed. I also recommend watching this with the lights off, as a lot of the film is really dark, and it also makes it more atmospheric too. I'm rating it a 7 out of 10 now, as that's what I thought, cause the more it's staying with me, the more I am liking it, so who knows if it'll stay this way.
I can hear a song right now. It's one that I've never heard before.
A song? You mean the whales? My long, long summer break is about to begin.
Children of the Sea is based on a manga about a lonely girl who meets two boys who were born and raised underwater and learn about what's happening at sea before Japan gets overflowed with fish and the meteoroid arrives and the world ends or something. I never read the manga this is based on. I only know of it because my high school library had a copy for some reason. From what I skimmed, it seemed cool, I guess. I've heard good things about it. What interested me about this movie were two things. The first was that it was made by Studio 4 Celsius, the same company that made Tekken Kinkreed, The Animatrix, Mind Game, MFKZ, among various other projects. The other was that the music was composed by Joe Hisaishi, who did the score for all of Hayao Miyazaki's things. So now I'm interested, and upon seeing it, I was pretty underwhelmed. Not by the things I mentioned, but by the movie itself. The animation is really goddamn cool, as per usual for Celsius. The movements, designs, details, cinematography, and backgrounds are all incredibly top-notch. I especially love the work that was put into all the scenery, and especially the marine life. I could tell they did their homework on these. Some of the character close-ups in this art style have a bit of an uncanny quality sometimes, and the CG interactions don't always line up that well, but otherwise this is a great looking film. The score is also really neat. I mean, it's Joe Hisaishi, who I think is one of the greatest composers working today. His music helped add a lot of personality and gravitas into scenes that are otherwise lacking in both. The stuff I came to see this movie for pretty much delivers. It's everything else that brings it down. This is one of the messiest, most confusing to follow things I've seen in a while. It falls under something I'd like to call Akira syndrome, in which a movie adaptation of a long phone book-sized manga tries to compress its story onto a more consumable 2-hour or less runtime. That's not to say a film like that is doomed to failure. The Akira movie is still a good movie despite this. But if you noticed earlier how unsure I sounded when I described the premise of the movie off of memory, then it should be a hint that the story's not that good. It throws a lot at you and not enough time to really process anything. Like whales and fish are invading Japan because of a meteorite that ties into the Sea Kids and their origin, and the main girl has to swallow it to learn the secrets of the universe. Yeah, it goes into some strange places. Which would be fine, except the other big issue I had was that I just didn't care about what was happening. The characters in this were all pretty bland, and their relationships with each other were nearly non-existent. The friendship that formed between the girl and the Sea brothers felt very rushed and underdeveloped, which is a big problem considering it's the emotional crux of the film. Same with the girl's relationship with her parents. It has scenes establishing that she and her mother don't get along well at all anymore, and that's about it. That's all the information we're really given. And apart from introducing a MacGuffin for the climax, it didn't even seem that important in the grand scheme of things. And I could say that for every new character that's introduced. They often exist as ciphers to deliver some sort of soliloquy about what it means to be living, or meteorites, or whatever else that was causing my mind to wander. It's sort of interesting that both movies I'm reviewing in this video have very heady conversations about existentialism. The big difference is that Charlie Kaufman is a good writer. I wonder if the criticisms I have of this would also apply to the manga, because from what I understand, that had positive responses from readers, while this has more of a mixed reception. I feel the compression may have been what hurt it, as I could only assume these characters had more personality or more purpose in a book format where your story can actually pace itself. This is what I mean by the Akira syndrome taking hold. It may have been more interesting to present this as a miniseries than a standalone feature. That way you could flesh out everything, especially the end of the world plot. Another 4 Celsius film that falls under a similar category is MFKZ, as that also had too big a story to tell for a movie of its runtime. But I'm a little more forgiving towards it, as it at least had this gonzo energy that kept me entertained throughout, even if I still acknowledged it's flawed. The same can't really be said for the Water Tots, as all the inquiries, all the "no one understands me" monologues get really monotonous after a while, to the point that I was just bored and waiting for it to end. I'm not sure if I'll read the manga immediately, as this was enough to sort of tire me out of the whole thing. I at least still appreciate the effort that Hisaishi and the crew at 4 Celsius tried to make this work. I'm always going to be interested in what they're doing next. If you want to judge this for yourself, it's streaming on Netflix, but I'd argue you'd be better off of ending things. Not in that way. Now if you excuse me, I'm going to drown myself in the abyss of introspection. 4 out of 10.
It stinks!